Xichen first noticed the change in Meng Yao on a quiet evening after a long, drawn-out council meeting. The last of the sect leaders had finally departed, their voices fading down the long corridors of the cloud recesses, leaving behind a silence that felt heavy and complete. But Meng Yao lingered. He was sorting through scrolls at a side table, a task he'd performed 100 times before, yet tonight his movements were different. He organized them with an unnecessary, almost painful precision, his focus intense, his back rigid. It was a subtle but clear attempt to avoid Zichen's gaze, a display of shyness that was utterly unlike the composed and ever-affable Lian Fengzan. Curiosity piqued, Zichen walked over, his soft boots making no sound on the polished wooden floors. He stopped a few feet away, watching the meticulous way Meng Yao's fingers rolled and tied each scroll. As Zichen's shadow fell over the table, Meng Yao's hands finally stilled. He didn't look up immediately, but his shoulders tightened. "Ziwujun," he greeted, his voice so soft it was almost lost in the room's stillness. A gentle smile touched Zichen's lips. The formality was a shield, and he knew it well. "Ayao," he replied, his tone warm and familiar. "You only call me Ziwujun when you're running from something." Meng Yao flinched, a small, almost imperceptible reaction. He finally lifted his head, but his eyes only met Zichen's for a fleeting second before darting away. He seemed to search for an excuse for one of his usual smooth deflections, but for once, it didn't come. "I'm not running," he said, the words lacking their usual conviction. His usual composure, that flawless mask he wore for the world, had a small, rare crack in it. Zichen took another step closer. "But you are hiding," he observed, his voice soft but sure. Meng Yao looked up then, and this time he held Zichen's gaze. The moment their eyes locked, something shifted in the air between them. It was a current of electricity, gentle and yet intensely charged, an intimacy that had been brewing beneath the surface for years, but never acknowledged. Zichen hadn't intended for the words to come out with such raw honesty, but they were already spoken, hanging in the space between them. "You've been avoiding me," he added, his voice quieter now, turning the observation into a vulnerable question. Meng Yao's lips parted, as if he might deny it, as if he might conjure a clever excuse. But instead, he exhaled a long, slow breath, a sound of surrender. The tension seemed to drain from his shoulders, replaced by a deep weariness. "It's dangerous to be close to me," he murmured, his gaze falling to the intricate patterns on Zichen's robes. "People will talk. They already do." The words were laced with a bitterness he rarely showed. Zichen's heart ached at the admission. He knew of the whispers, the cruel gossip that followed Meng Yao like a shadow. But in that moment, a protective instinct, fierce and unfamiliar, rose within him. "Let them," he said, the words leaving him before he could think to stop them. His tone was uncharacteristically bold, almost defiant, and it made Meng Yao startle, his eyes widening in surprise. "XichenYao." Meng Yao whispered the name, his cheeks warming with a sudden flush. Hearing his name spoken like that, so soft, so vulnerable, stripped of all formality, it felt like a key turning in a lock deep within Zichen's heart. Something long suppressed, something he hadn't even dared to name, was suddenly loosened. Acting on an impulse he didn't try to understand, Zichen reached out. His hand hesitated for a fraction of a second before he gently brushed a thumb against Meng Yao's cheekbone. The touch was as light as a breath, yet Meng Yao froze as if struck, his entire body going rigid. "I am not afraid of rumors," Zichen said, his voice a low, gentle murmur that wrapped around them in the quiet room. "But I am," Meng Yao whispered back, and Zichen could feel the slight tremble under his thumb. "Not for myself. For you." The admission was heartbreaking in its sincerity. After all he had endured, his first fear was for Zichen's reputation, not his own safety. That selfless fear shattered the last of Zichen's restraint. He moved closer, closing the remaining distance between them until he could feel the warmth radiating from Meng Yao's body. "Your well-being has always mattered to me," he said, his eyes searching Meng Yao's. "Your happiness matters to me." Meng Yao's dark lashes fluttered, casting shadows on his flushed cheeks. "You speak as if—" he swallowed, his throat tight with emotion. "As if you feel," Zichen didn't let him finish. He gently cupped Meng Yao's chin, lifting it just enough so their eyes were level, so Meng Yao could not look away. He wanted him to see the truth, the sincerity in his gaze. "I do," he confirmed, the two simple words holding the weight of unspoken years. Time seemed to stop. The world outside the small circle of their presence ceased to exist. The only sound was the soft sputter of the lantern hanging above them, its light flickering, casting shifting patterns of gold and shadow across Meng Yao's face. It was a face that had carried too much pain, a mind that had borne too much calculation, a heart that had known too much loneliness. And in that moment, Xichen wanted to smooth away all of it. "Tell me to stop," he whispered, his own voice husky with emotion. Meng Yao didn't seem to be breathing. His eyes were wide, luminous, reflecting the lantern light. A war of emotions played out across his features: fear, disbelief, and a desperate, fragile hope. Finally, a single tear escaped and traced a path down his cheek. "I won't," he said, his voice breaking on the single word. That was all the permission Xichen needed. He leaned in and kissed him. It began as a question, slow, soft, achingly careful. He was giving Meng Yao every chance to pull away, to reconsider. But then Meng Yao exhaled a shuddering breath against his lips, a sound of pure relief, and his fingers curled into the front of Xichen's pristine white robes, clinging to him as if to a lifeline. The gentle question became a definite answer. The kiss deepened, filled with an aching, desperate need that had been buried for years. In that one touch, all the years of restraint unraveled. All the unspoken devotion, the admiration Meng Yao had never dared to show, the feelings he thought he had to hide forever, it all poured out of him in a shuddering sigh that Xichen felt more than heard. It was the taste of longing, of gratitude, of a man who had never believed he was worthy of being loved so gently. When they finally broke apart, it was only for a breath. Xichen pressed his forehead to Meng Yao's, their breaths tangling in the small space between them. The scent of sandalwood and old paper filled his senses. "Stay with me," he whispered, the plea raw and urgent. Meng Yao's answer was immediate, devoid of any artifice or calculation. "I want to." Xichen looked into those beautiful, complicated eyes and saw everything. He knew how dangerous the world was for Meng Yao. He knew the cruelty he faced every day, the dark shadows of his past that clung to him, the enemies he had made. He knew the path ahead was fraught with peril. And yet he cupped Meng Yao's face with both hands, holding him as if he were the most precious thing in the world, and made a promise that a wise sect leader probably shouldn't have made. "I will protect you." At those words, Meng Yao's eyes softened, and for the first time that Xichen could ever remember, they held no mask, no hidden layer. They were simply open, vulnerable, and filled with a light that stole Xichen's breath. "You always have," he whispered, leaning into the warmth of Xichen's touch, finally allowing himself a moment of peace. For the rest of that night, they stayed together in the quiet study, bathed in the lantern's gentle, golden glow. There were no titles, no politics, no burdens of the cultivation world. It was not Ziwu Jun and Lian Fengzan. It was just Xichen and Yao, just two men, bruised and battered by the world, finding a moment of healing in each other's hands. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe for more stories.